Now, if you look at outside and from a market perspective, right? I mean, you have, of course, the AI native companies, you have the hyperscalers, you have the incumbents. Like everyone seems to be stepping on each other's toes, right? And it seems like every week, I was saying every month, but I'm like every week, somebody seems to be going into some other company's space. And I know you guys are at C stage, right? So you are kind of still figuring out the
Yeah.
PMF part and all that. But how are you thinking even at this stage about differentiation, right? Like what is it in the product that should give you the edge in the market as all these big companies and small companies are getting into your space as well?
Can probably spend a couple of minutes talking about Pipeshift and what we solve for.
Yeah.
Because I think we have spent almost a year figuring out what is the differentiated problem that we can solve for. Um, and I think that one thing is like probably we are young and naive enough to take contrarian bets early on. Uh, I was listening to Vijay from Atomic Work once, and he was also talking about like how as you get more experience, your risk of taking ability of taking a contrarian bet, not taking a big bet on something known, but like taking a contrarian bet becomes lower. But I think probably that it's our naivety. We started with something 6 months back. Things were not working that well for 6 months because then we were competing with Together AI, Fireworks, people who have built out the ground up developer adoption, gone gone into the lowest hanging fruits and have built PLG from ground up. Um, that competition with 50, 60 times lower capital is really hard to play when they have been playing it for like three, four, like a couple of years longer than you. So we were like, what's the best use of our capital? Let's find the right niche of customers that we can work with and find that narrow edge that we can enter the market with, but solve for a pain that nobody else is looking at. Coming down to what we have realized is today, if you're building any real-time application, and then this is learnings over like a year of just grinding. We built like two lines of businesses, scaled to 130, 150 uh, kind of run rates across them almost every quarter, months. But then we had to like shut those down, scale things back again from zero, because we're like this GTM is not working. So I think two things that helped us a lot. One is not shying away from saying no or firing a customer if you feel like that's not going to be the right place that you need to be because your capital is going to burn just if you keep doing that and you know that it's not going to work out. So remove the baggage as soon as possible so you can move fast. And the second thing I think that you realize is just speak to as many people as you can and don't look at what's hyping on Twitter. Just meet someone and understand what's their problem. And I think asking the right questions, it's again first principles, basics, but I think people still don't know how to ask the right questions. I also didn't know. I learned over a year. So now my question pretty much is as a engineering leader, what's top of your mind? What's bothering you? What's keeping you awake? Just give them a free flow to talk about the problems. Then you will pretty much hear where you can fit in. I think that's what gave us the clue, which is today, if you're building any real-time application, be it a chatbot, voice bot, or a voice agent, these can be computer use agents, whatever, anything that has real-time use cases. The problem with customers today is they're all built and scaled on top of serverless infrastructure, which is APIs, token-based APIs. Uh, that does not work when it comes to production scale and SLAs. A very strong belief that we have is today your SLAs or your performance outcomes and everything is defined by the API provider that you have. Rather, in production, as a product team, once you have hit PMF on that use case, discovery phase is behind. Once you have hit PMF on that use case, your SLAs need to be defined by you. It's about what you want to get to over the next 6 months to a year and what you want to offer to your customer. And then your infrastructure needs to be reinforced according to that. And it's simple when you think about it, but then most companies that we spoke to were just like, we'll just stick to the best model. And when we were talking to them, we kind of realized that it's probably a notion that they have not doubled down on. Because when we spoke to, say, a unicorn company's CTO, they're like, I just believe that the models are going to keep getting better, so I would rather build on closed source models. And then my next question was that what are you going to do with a deep research model when you're supporting customer support voice agents for your e-commerce customers? And he had no answer. He's like, that's right. And then we went into like an hour of conversation on how he can just use a smaller custom trained model and actually deliver better latencies, better experiences, better scale to his customers rather than just sitting relying on one mod. It's a stable use case. So that's these are the things that we started doing, like open-ended questions and giving them a cue to actually go into the thought, thought thoughts that we want them to. And then the second thing that we started realizing if is, for example, voice agents. Today, you would use a deepgram for transcription. You would have a LLM on some on your Bedrock or Vertex AI, something like that. You would have an 11 labs for TTS. All of this end-to-end chaining would happen across at least three different regions of service. Um, so as a voice company, you are trying to chain together three APIs from different servers, different locations, different data centers, which all add network latencies across each API call. And we were like, if you're in production, what you'd rather need is having your own self-hosted Kubernetes cluster on which you can have a STT model, like let's say Whisper, a TTS model, and an LLM all together in the same cluster, in the same data center or region. So the end-to-end API call is like probably 5 times faster. And then replicating that across Kubernetes clusters in different clouds wherever there is availability. So you can be on AWS in US West, you can be on Azure in US East, you can be on uh, Nebius in Europe, you can be on Iota or NISA in India, and be on uh, GCP on in Southeast Asia. So like 5 regions just replicate the same deployment and then creating a routing logic that allows you to get to the right region for the exact SLA that you want from a latency perspective. And these are problems that most people or developers who are building on Twitter, hacking on Twitter, they don't know about because these are production problems less talked about. These are hair on fire problems for engineers that they are trying to solve as engineering managers because they don't find dev tools that are actually doing these things. So I think that's largely where we come in from. We're like, we'll help you with managed distributed inference that's SLA compliant, uh, built for real-time use cases. So you can deliver SLAs that you want to. And I think that's our contrarian belief, which is that companies don't want a dev tool in production. They want outcome-based APIs because that's what OpenAI and Anthropic provide them. So just ask them what's the SLA that they want, what's the performance they want, and make sure they have an API that just works. That's more than enough for them. They do not want a dev tool or CLI or SDK where they can deploy 100 models. That's an experimentation problem. Let the other companies solve that. We'll solve the production problems. And we'll sell outcomes rather than selling a dev tool or an SDK.
Yeah, very interesting what you said. I think kind of couple of implicit points in that, right? And would love to get your thoughts on that. I think one, it seems like I see this tendency, especially in the dev tool space, and when founders are technical, that they tend to focus on their problem statements and their universe. And the fact of the matter is that there is a whole universe out there which has very different problems and who are actually paying customers. So that's one, which is I think there is a lot to be said about. Yeah, you can start off with your strengths, but you have to first index on what are the problem statements that the potential ICPs are facing. That's one. And then second is it sounds like, especially in the enterprise space, as you start peeling the onion, there are still a lot of these crevices which are still uncovered by the large companies or by kind of existing even scaled AI native companies.
Hmm. I think it's also the incentive structure. Like an AWS does not have an incentive to solve for this at core. They would rather work with a standalone partner or something that does this for their customers. And the other thing is when you actually start dealing with SLAs and real-time reliability, a single cloud vendor also doesn't solve for the problem because you'll always have availability issues. So you have to go multi-cloud, you have to maintain latencies, maintain availability, maintain scalability. You have to go multi-cloud. So you'll have to have an agnostic player that comes in and does a large part of the heavy lifting on infrastructure. And by default, most product engineering teams don't understand how they can actually deploy models, scale models. Max, they can do a couple of GPUs of LLMs. But when you're scaling, a couple of GPUs are not enough. You have to probably create and scale cross nodes and across nodes and interconnects. And that's where the problem starts happening. Again, I keep going back to people that other people's thoughts, but I think it's a great way of articulating how Arvind Srinivas from Perplexity mentioned it. It's like if they say it can be built in weekends or if it can build quick, they have never built anything for production. So I think it's literally that problem, which is like, okay, as a developer, you can run things on a single GPU. What happens when you're running two models under at a concurrency of 100 requests per second across three regions? That's the problem that you need to look at as a company to solve for. Uh, and that's where the real value is.